Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Godless Mom. We have not been around in a couple of weeks. We've had just a crazy couple of weeks, basically. But before we get started, I just want to mention that the conference on religious trauma is coming. It's like right around the corner. And
Yes.
this is a conference that you want to be a part of. I'll let Janice tell you a little bit more about it.
Yes, the Conference on Religious Trauma is coming up May 11th to 16th. It's online. And if you are someone who has left religion, or you know someone else who has left religion, or a high pressure group, cults, anything like that, this is a conference that they won't want to miss because we have experts in the field of religious trauma syndrome. And then we also have guests who have walked through their own religious trauma and are in recovery themselves, some of them quite well known. So yes, please look at our link below for the conference on religious trauma that's coming up. Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm probably going to attend most of it. It's something that I really believe in. It's definitely like if you're a part of this conference, you are a part of change that will absolutely save lives. So definitely check it out. And then also in the description, there is a fundraiser that I'm doing with my organization that is to raise money for a vocational school in Uganda that teaches life skills and business skills and all kinds of stuff to women in Uganda who have left arranged marriages, or I mean, a lot of the women in Uganda are not educated, and so this enables them to be more independent and all of that stuff. So if you could, please click the link down below and give. Even just $1 would help these ladies. It goes really, 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 really far in Uganda. And also down below is the audio version of our podcast. And if you do listen to the audio version on iTunes or on Google Podcasts, if you could please give us a rating and review it, that really helps us out. And then the final thing that I need to mention before we start talking about vaccines is that conspiracy people, you're going to get blocked because you're dangerous and you are responsible for hurting a lot of people. And with that said, today we're going to be talking about vaccines, which is a very polarizing topic these days, and it has been polarizing in my own personal life, as any of you who are following me on Twitter know very well. This has been a very big issue in my personal life, so I thought that I would talk today about vaccines, and we can address the various reasons why people are vaccine hesitant to the best of our knowledge, and hopefully maybe change some minds today. But first, how are you doing, Janice?
Well, I'm doing better today, but yesterday something happened to me that is, similar to along these lines. I was out grocery shopping, my nice Canadian grocery store with my daughter. And what do I see but a young man not wearing a mask? And by young man, I mean, like he's in his late 20s or whatever. Everyone else in the store is wearing a mask. I'm wearing one. My immune compromised daughter's wearing one, but this guy is not wearing one. And I see him, and I'm just, all of a sudden I can feel my blood pressure starting to rise. Like I'm so irritated. I'm looking around. Where is security? And the guy he's looking at everybody like he just wants to be noticed, that he thinks he's making this statement by not wearing a mask. So I'm pushing my cart angrily through the store, ready to go full Karen on this guy. And I finally find an 18-year-old security guard, this poor young fellow. And I said, there is a man in the next aisle and he is not wearing a mask. And this poor kid's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go and talk to him. And so he does. And then, of course, he comes back to me and says, well, ma'am, he says that actually he has an exemption. And I'm like, he doesn't have an exemption. But, of course, I was powerless to do anything except push my cart angrily through the store for the rest of the time. So my shopping experience then was not pleasant because I just was so worked up. And my poor kid is like, just trying to calm down, Mom. We don't want you to have a jammer over this. But I found it a highly stressful experience. And that is my story. And so today I'm inside. I haven't left my house. I haven't seen anyone else. So I'm doing great.
Yeah. As soon as we leave the house, that's when everything goes downhill. And it's funny because right before we started we went live, right before we went live, I got a text from my daughter who works at a grocery store in the produce section, and she found a note in the apples that said, visit this website to find out the truth or something like that. And of course, it's a conspiracy website about the truth about COVID and all of this stuff. And yeah, so to kind of just recap why this has come up for us is that, I mean, obviously the pandemic, but I have people in my family who I am currently trying to convince to get a vaccine, and I have been back and forth in email with them for days now, and I feel like this is all I've been talking about. So I might as well put those arguments out there and maybe help some people understand why we shouldn't be afraid of the COVID vaccines. But I think like the most common, I don't know, do people argue with you about it, Janice? About the vaccines?
I've had like maybe one or two people brazen enough on my Facebook feed to try and school me in it, and it doesn't go well. It doesn't last long because I won't allow that kind of stuff on my Facebook feed because it is so dangerous. So I might try, I might have one or two attempts with them cordially, but then they just end up being blocked. I don't have the time or the energy or the inclination, but it's also not something that has directly affected my family. It's quite different when it's in your own family and you have this grave concern that loved ones have been sucked down this rabbit hole of anti-vax.
Yeah, I think that like I'm the same way. I'll block people right away. I don't even give them a chance. I'll just block them right away because I don't want to hear your bullshit. If you live in the same world that I live in and you have access to the same information that I have access to, honestly, there's really no reason why you should be an anti-vaxxer. And the reason that I always give to anybody who ever asks me about that is that one side has evidence and the other side has a bunch of claims. And those claims, yes, if you go on those conspiracy theory websites, you'll see that they connect a bunch of different coincidences. Like one of the things that they'll mention is that a year before the pandemic, there was a pandemic conference. And this is somehow evidence of the fact that the pandemic conference, which was open to the public, that everybody knew about, is where all of these heads of states were going to plan how they're going to kill us with this pandemic. No, there's been multiple pandemic. We've talked about pandemics have been in our cultural zeitgeist for many decades. That's what zombie movies are about, for fuck's sake. Like, pardon my French, but that's what zombie movies are about. And The Walking Dead, it's huge because we're like, this is something that we're all deeply afraid of, is a pandemic that affects us. And it's not anti-vaccine, it's choice, as somebody says in the chat. It actually is not just your own personal choice, because if you're choosing not to get the vaccine, you're choosing to slow our ability to get to herd immunity. And you're basically saying that whether or not that your choice to not get the vaccine is more important than whether or not 80 million people die from this. And that is, by the way, 1% of the world population. People love to say, that the fatality rate of COVID-19 is 1%, or they'll say 0.9%. That's 80 million people. That's 80 million people. Like, that's a massive amount of people. That's bigger than World War II. That's bigger than World War I. That's bigger than any atrocity that's happened in our lifetime. And it's, someone else in the chat just said you hurt other people with that choice. You're hurting other people with that choice. And if we don't ever reach herd immunity, we do have a 1% mortality rate, then we lose 80 million people.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I said to my family member is that your odds of vaccine injury, because she sent me some information about vaccine injury. She said since 1988, $4.5 billion have been paid out to compensate people who have suffered vaccine injury. And I corrected her. I said, yes, $4.5 billion has been paid out since 1988, but that amounts to 7,000 people out of billions of doses of vaccines. That amounts to 7,000 people. If you actually go look at the data, it's 7,000 people. And this is a program that was specifically set up to compensate people who get vaccine injuries, which is something that we know that it happens, but the odds are 1 in 4.5 million. Your odds of getting into a car accident when you get into your car is 1 in 100. And you're saying that you're going to stop, you're not going to get the vaccine, which could save 80 million lives, because it's the odds of you getting an injury is 4.5, and that's injury, not death. 4.5, 1 in 4.5 million, but you won't stop driving your car or getting into vehicles, and your odds of dying in that are or being injured in that are 1 in 100.
Right.
It's just, there's no logic, there's no rational thought behind this, and
Yeah.
it's very frustrating.
I want to acknowledge Randolph there. Hi, Randolph. I'm glad you're here. And he says, in response to posting a science article about how vaccines work, hundreds of anti-vaxxers ganged up on me and made a lot of false reports that resulted in Facebook permanently disabling my account. I'm really sorry that happened. That's beyond
awful.
disappointing. That's very upsetting. And one other point I wanted to make, because it can be really easy for us to just say, well, people who believe conspiracy theories are dumb, or they're less intelligent, they have a lower IQ. This is absolutely not true. And I recognize that from being a fundamentalist Christian for most of my life, and then being able to break out of it. It is a very similar mindset. I mean, it's all a cult, essentially. What happens is that someone is vulnerable somewhere along the line, and that vulnerability makes them more susceptible to falling down that rabbit hole, or getting sucked into that rabbit hole. So I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah, and something that I actually watched, I couldn't sleep last night. I might have had a couple of drinks and stayed up late by myself watching documentaries. But one of the documentaries that
you should have called me.
Yeah.
I was doing the same thing.
One of the documentaries that I watched is a new one on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and it's about how the social media feeds are set up in such a way that they get the most amount of reaction out of you, the most amount of interaction and action out of you. And the best way for them to do that is to appeal to things that they know. And one of the things that they said in this documentary is that the like Facebook collects so much data, so much raw data on you, your likes, your dislikes, your behavior, every little thing, what you click on, how much time you spend looking at one piece of content, all of this stuff. And from that, they are able to make the most accurate prediction models that we've ever seen in history of how you're going to respond to any piece of information that you see in your feed. So they know what's going to trigger an emotional reaction in you.
Wow.
And that's what they show you in your feed. And like, for instance, the people in my family who are having issues with getting the vaccine, one of them has been my entire life absolutely and 100% obsessed with health, with food, with extending their life, with just having control over their own mortality. And I believe that she believes that she actually does have control over her own mortality. And this feeds right into it, because when you think about what a pandemic is, it's just a random event. It's just a random virus that shows up in our world and it can threaten everything. And it proves, it's just the absolute most mind-blowing proof that we are powerless at the mercy of nature, that this world is hostile and the universe is hostile to life. And the fact that we've even come this far is incredible. And it's ultimately admitting that this pandemic is just a virus that just appeared in nature and attacked us. Sorry, dog barking in the background. Is to admit that we don't have control. It's to admit that we have no control over our own mortality and over the course of our future. And that is a very scary thing to admit. I will admit it myself. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't accept the fact that it is still reality. We've had pandemics in the past, we've had viruses in the past, and it's, it's these people, they want to believe that it's been created by humans because that belief makes them feel like humans have control.
And there have been anti-vaxxers since smallpox vaccine was developed. That was like our first vaccine that ever came about, and it was really disgusting how the guy did it too. He took the germs, whatever, from the cow that was sick, that was dying from it, and rubbed them into the like an open cut or an open sore or whatever of a child. Oh boy, we could never do that now. But it actually worked. But yeah, people, every time there's been a pandemic, there have been people shouting and screaming, no, they refuse any kind of vaccination, or they refuse to wear masks. And it really becomes very polarizing. And for some people, they have it in their head, their religious reasoning. They believe Jesus will save them from everything, including this. Apparently, those people have never known another religious person who's died of a car accident or anything like that. Or more likely, they just write it off and say, it was his time to go. But they're not taking into account the fact that they can be shedding and spreading the virus and killing other people.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that's the number one thing that I started with in my rebuttal. It is the fact that, a lot of people thought at the beginning of a pandemic, they thought if we just do like mass exposures, then we'll get to herd immunity faster and everything will be fine. But you have to understand that getting to mass exposures or to doing mass exposures is the same exact thing as letting the virus run its course. We still end up with 80 million dead. We still end up with, and the number one concern has never been the fatality rate. The number one concern of COVID-19 has been the overwhelming of our healthcare system, because then you're not just worried about the fatality rate with COVID, you're worried about the fatality rate with stroke victims, with heart attack victims, with car accident victims, with all of these people who can no longer get medical attention because the hospital is full. Our hospitals right now, I don't know if you're aware of this, Janice, but our hospitals in the Okanagan, yours is Kelowna, mine is Penticton, both of them are at around 99% capacity right now.
Wow, that's
we're already using surge beds. We don't have enough doctors and nurses. We never really did, let's face it. But now it's even scarier. And that is happening because people are not being careful enough. And they're not, some people are refusing vaccination. And if we continue down this path where they say 30% of Canadians are vaccine hesitant, if we keep heading down this path and 30% of us don't get vaccinated, we don't reach herd immunity. We stay in this forever.
And there's a real possibility of that happening. Yeah.
So when you say that it's a choice, you are choosing that. You are choosing the overwhelming of our hospital systems, the endangering of our nurses and doctors. With every new patient that walks through those doors with COVID, you are endangering our already limited doctors and nurses. You are also ensuring that this pandemic goes longer and extends longer, and that we have to socially distance longer, and we have to wear masks longer, and we have lockdowns for longer. And so that is, you're choosing not to get a vaccine, but you're also choosing all of those things. You're choosing that for me. You're choosing that for my son. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not okay.
Mm-hmm. You know, one way that I just found out this morning, I wasn't even aware of this. One additional way that anti-vax groups are sucking people in is by targeting newly bereaved mothers. So mothers, particularly who have lost infants, maybe to SIDS or something else where the doctors maybe haven't been able to make a full declaration on what caused the death. And that really made me so angry that they would target these mothers. There are billboards in the States actually that say, did your child die unexpectedly? And they put a link at the bottom, and it doesn't say anything about being anti-vax, but just a link to a website, and then they suck them in that way. I thought that was just
It should be
so
illegal.
horrible. Yeah, terrible, terrible thing to
That's
do.
we actually have well, we know of somebody else who a few years ago she lost her baby when she was pregnant. And she was like 8.5 months pregnant, and she had to like give birth to a stillborn baby.
Oh
And
dear.
yeah, it was absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And now there's misinformation on the internet that has indicated that the COVID-19 vaccines contain this protein that basically, or contain something that fights off a protein that you need for the placenta. And ultimately it messes with your fertility and your ability to carry a child to term. And so of course this person that we know who lost a child, this is terrifying to her, and very rightly so, right? Like, I don't blame her for being terrified about hearing about that. But the thing is that people hear that because they're so emotionally attached to that one subject, that they read the article, and it's full of all this misinformation, and they want to believe it because they already have this history with it, and this makes them feel like they have control over whatever it is they feel so strongly about. And they don't fact check, and that's the problem, is they just believe it because they want to, and they don't fact check. And like, just before we went live, I searched the information about that, and it started, that rumor about it being wrong, bad for people who want to have babies, was started by two notorious anti-vax propagandists in the UK.
Good grief.
And they said that there's something in the vaccine that causes antibodies. It causes the body to form antibodies to this protein that is necessary for basically a healthy pregnancy. And that ingredient that they claim is in the vaccine is not in any of the COVID vaccines. And you can verify this information. It's very easy. You just search, for what are the ingredients of the COVID-19 vaccines and stuff like that. It's very easy to find out whether or not these claims are true, but people don't want to search that information out
That's
because they
right.
want to believe it.
Yeah, and it's the difference between using real world data and just continuing to look for things that support your supposition that you already have about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you know what we have established is really, really bad for pregnant moms? COVID. COVID is.
Mhm.
COVID is bad for pregnant moms and the fetus. So,
Mhm.
I mean, this misinformation that you are choosing to believe is what is actually going to end up endangering you. And that's
Mhm.
what people just don't seem to understand. And it's so frustrating.
One thing I find interesting, I think in some ways I do. Yeah, I think it's actually true. It's not a lack of information that is causing this problem necessarily. It's a lack of trust. So these people now are mistrusting of anyone in authority, basically. So the government, their doctor, any other doctors, people who disagree with them. So it's that it's that lack of trust and that is really, really hard to counteract, because if we're trying to point them to factual information from the CDC or, Dr. Henry or whatever other groups we're using, and they don't trust that information, how do you reach them then? What have you learned? I have my own ideas and some of my own notes about talking to people who are vaccine hesitant. Have you found anything, or have you been trying a particular tactic with your family members?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction was rage. I'm not gonna lie. I was angry because I mean there was a lot to take in. It wasn't just finding out that they were vaccine hesitant. There was a lot more. And one day I'll get into it, I promise. But right now I just don't want to make this stuff
Okay.
totally public.
Mm-hmm.
But the my first reaction was rage. And then I started reading a book by Mick West called Escaping the Rabbit Hole, which I highly recommend you guys read. It's so good. And it's basically about how to talk to the people in your life who might be stuck down a rabbit hole like this. And one of the things that he said is be patient, don't give up, win their trust, because if they don't trust you, they're not going to listen to anything you say. And so I had to calm down. I had to learn how to put my anger aside, and I would talk to them, and one of the things that he says to bring them back to a time before they were down this rabbit hole. And so I, in my communications with this person, I would talk about the history of, like, for instance, when we were talking about vaccine injury, I brought up the fact that when I had my son, I had him in Mexico, and I got this big tetanus shot, and it right in my ass cheek, and for a whole year, that ass cheek was sore a whole entire year. So
that
I
must
told
have
my
been
mom,
a very big needle.
yeah, so I told them that I had a vaccine injury. That's a vaccine injury. And that's something that people don't seem to understand, is that vaccine injury doesn't mean something horrible. 9 times out of 10, that means an anaphylactic shock, which indicates an allergy. And we don't outlaw peanuts. We don't outlaw peanut butter, right? It doesn't, like, when somebody goes into anaphylactic shock after getting a vaccine, it doesn't mean that the vaccine is dangerous. It just means that person has an allergy.
Mm-hmm.
And and so, and then other people will get bruises. Other people, sometimes they get severe muscle soreness. And these are the people who petitioned for compensation through this program that was being cited in my conversation back and forth, that paid out $4.5 billion since 1988. 99% of those vaccine injuries were completely harmless. And the organization that settled these complaints or these petitions would, like, their mandate was basically to settle them as fast as possible so that court costs stayed low. And so they didn't even fact check that the injuries were caused by the vaccines in the first place. They just said, okay, here, have some money. That's it. And so it's, yeah. Go ahead.
You got a lot to say on this topic. It's good that we're doing this show. I like what you said at the beginning there about trying to either build or retain the trust of the person who has jumped on the anti-vax bandwagon. And some ways that we can do that is to actually listen to them. And so we're seeking to understand rather than necessarily to immediately win the debate, win the argument. We're not going to be like shaming people, judgment, strong arm tactics. Those things do not work at all. Those just shut the person down or push them into martyr mode. Oh,
Mhm.
my beloved person called me this and called me that because I am doing the right thing by not getting the vaccination or whatever thing it is that they're doing. We want to try and ask how questions rather than why questions whenever it's possible, because when we're asking someone why do you believe that, why did you do that, it puts them on the defensive right away. But if
Mhm.
we come at it from the point of, that's really interesting, I haven't heard that before, tell me how you came to that conclusion, I'd like to know more. um,
Yeah.
and that can facilitate keeping the dialogue open, and sometimes that might actually be the only thing, the very best outcome of the situation is that we've managed not to lose our temper and slam the door on that relationship. And so some people might find, I don't know if you found this, but some people might find if they have been maintaining like a Zoom contact with the person so you can see their face, it's so hard to hide your eye rolls or your face going red because you're so mad. You maybe have to switch to just emailing back and forth, like a different mode of communication where you have the time to process and think about what you want to say to them and how you want to respond to whatever ridiculous things they are saying. Because
Yeah.
that's what it feels like.
That's exactly what I found, because that initial just that initial phone call, it was a video call that we had, like I said, it was I was just angry. I was just angry, and I couldn't help it, and,
Yeah.
um, so I definitely found that email is a much better medium.
Hmm.
It was very difficult, and I know this person very well. These people in my family, I know them very well. I lived with them my whole life, and they are one of them is very, very stubborn, and he doesn't like to listen in the moment. He will listen over the long term, like
Okay.
things will eventually start to sink in, but
Hmm.
in the moment, he just gets his back up. And then
Mm.
there's no getting through that.
Mhm,
And so
mhm. How
I think it's a
frustrating.
lot easier. Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's a lot easier to do it through email. And but I think it's also really important to note, and this is something that I had to say to other family members who are having difficulty with this situation, um, that it's okay to, if you feel that this is too much, if you feel it's too much, it's not your job. It's not your job to educate grown adults on basic science.
Mhm, mhm.
It's not your job to educate grown adults on how the internet works. It's not your job, and it's totally okay, and it is absolutely not selfish and nothing that you need to feel guilty about if you walk away and you say, I have had enough. um
You're allowed to make
and
that boundary.
yeah, and it's you don't have any obligation to try and change their mind at all.
Mhm, mhm.
um and I mean, it's sad, and all of that, but something that you have to remember, and we've talked about this so many times before on this podcast, is that it is not you're not making the choice. You've set your boundary down, and they've crossed it on purpose, and you told them what the consequences might be. And you following through with those consequences that they were aware of and they risked anyway, they're the ones making the choice. You're not the one making the choice.
Mhm.
Um
Excellent point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're basically allowing this misinformation. We've lived hundreds of years with vaccines and modern medicine, and there's never been a plot to inject us with microchips or anything like that. There's so much more established history and fact and science behind vaccines being safe than there is in their conspiracy theories. So it's
Mhm.
not on equal footing in any way, shape, or form. It's not like saying, they're entitled to their opinion and we should just respect their opinion. No, that's not the
Right,
case.
right.
It's not the
Yeah,
case. It doesn't
exactly
apply to,
right.
yeah.
I don't know if you're aware, in Quebec, they actually have vaccine counselors, in the hospitals there on the maternity wards because what they found is the time to approach the parent is, right around the time of the birth. And what the vaccine counselors do is they're approaching in a very open, calm, non-judgmental manner. So they're maintaining empathy and a respectful attitude, what we call in the therapy world unconditional positive regard for the person that they're talking to. And they might ask, what's your opinion on vaccines? And what was it like for you to be vaccinated? And, did you vaccinate your other children? And they're asking the questions, and then they're really listening for the response, for the answer from this parent. And they're listening for cues and clues in the parent's answer, that there might be an opening there. Like if there's any kind of doubt, or if there's any kind of pain associated with the answer, because they're feeling that now they're being victimized because now none of their family will talk to them or whatever. And the counselor is working hard to maintain empathy for that person. And for some of those parents in the hospital, this is the first interaction they've had with anyone in the medical community who has not, just put up their hands and, tried to run them over with information and, tell them how you're going to kill your baby, blah, blah, blah. But they're staying calm and they're trying to keep that dialogue open. And something else they do is they ask the parent, they ask for permission to give them information. And that's allowing the other person to maintain their dignity, to maintain their autonomy, their sense of autonomy. The counselor is recognizing, or the other person in the conversation is recognizing the autonomy of the other person. So when we're talking with folks who are so far vaccine hesitant, it's okay for us to say, we don't have all the answers. We don't know all the answers. That's a true statement. And maybe instead of saying the internet is a stupid place to look for information, we might try the tactic of saying, I'm glad that you're looking for information to help you make your decision. So it can be really hard, depending how close we are to the person and to the situation, like super duper hard to maintain that calmness. But that's the type of thing, again, that's going to leave the option for communication open. And you might be the one person who doesn't judge them, so that when they do start questioning and wondering about some of the information they're receiving, they remember, oh, I can talk to Courtney about this. I can talk to Janice about this. They were kind to me before. So you never know. You might be that lifeline in a way that you hadn't even anticipated.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've said repeatedly. I'm like, it's good that you're questioning things. It's good that you're looking for more information. But something else that I did in one of the emails that I sent was I asked a bunch of questions. And one of the first questions was, how do you like decipher between what you believe and what you don't believe? What is the difference between something that you will believe and something that you won't believe? And then later on in the email, I said, can you name four big things that you've changed your mind about in the last decade? And of course, the person responded and said that they judge what is true and what's not true by going with their gut and what they feel in their heart. And
Oh
then,
dear.
in the other question, they answered four actual big things that they changed their mind about. And I said, I hope that you see the problem with this. Like, you admitted you were wrong about these four big things. So your heart is not a source of truth. Your gut is not a source of truth. And the thing that we've all atheists have probably said at one point or another is that reality doesn't it's not here to fit what makes sense to us.
All right.
Right? It's not you don't judge what is real and what's not by what makes sense, because sometimes things don't make sense. Childhood cancer makes sense, but it's there and it happens. And it, it's just, oh, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And it's just, I believe very strongly in, well, it's not even that I believe. I know that vaccines are the only way that we get out of this. It's the only way that we can get out of this pandemic and we move forward. And the funny thing is that it's all these anti-maskers, all these people who are anti-lockdown, all these people who are so sick and tired of the social distancing and all of this stuff
They
who
wanted to get
are,
back to normal.
yeah, but they're not willing to do their part to get
Mhm.
back to normal. And it just,
Mhm.
and they can't seem to
Yeah.
connect that
Uh,
despite the fact it's right there.
so that is so true. Um, as a therapist, something that we use is called motivational interviewing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And generally, it comes into play when we're working with folks who have a substance addiction problem. And so it's normal for people to be ambivalent about change. And so the goal of motivational interviewing is to help people identify and resolve their ambivalence about something so that they can actually move towards making the change, because there are stages of change. We don't just often go like, say, if you want to quit smoking or something that's really addictive, it takes a while to get there. So first you're in pre-contemplation, which means no. The answer is going to be no.
Yeah.
Then you might move to a stage of contemplation, and then the answer becomes maybe. So this is what we're really hoping that, when folks are vaccine hesitant, that they might be in that pre-contemplation. Then there's the preparation or determination stage. So they've kind of made their decision and they're trying to plan out, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. My last day is going to be on this date. I'm going to have so many nicotine patches available, whatever it is. Then they move to the action phase. And then after that, they move into the maintenance phase, which is where they keep going. But so we want to be asking open-ended questions. We want to be affirming to them. No wonder you're concerned. The thing, like you just said about saying, yeah, I'm glad that you're searching for information. That's very affirming. And we want to be practicing reflective listening also, to make sure that we understand what they're saying, because it is possible for someone to say something and we completely misinterpret it. So with reflective listening, we're able to kind of gauge that and figure that out, if that's actually what they mean. So motivational interviewing type of technique can be helpful when we're dealing with folks who are stuck in conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's interesting. I'll have to do some reading about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
In our
popular.
chat, someone said only I think that they were talking about when I said the only way to end the pandemic is with the vaccine. And they replied saying, only way, how about a UBI and Medicare for all so people don't have to go to work during a pandemic? I totally agree with the UBI
Mm-hmm.
and with
Mm-hmm.
Medicare for all. Like, I'm all
Mm-hmm.
for that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to end the pandemic, unfortunately. The pandemic is still going to spread in grocery stores. It's still going to spread at concerts and movie theaters and restaurants.
Yeah.
And, there was a group of kids in the park last night, like, 20 of them all close together. That's not going to stop that. Sorry. And you
Yeah.
don't. And the other thing too is that a lot of people think that just like exposing everybody is going to create herd immunity, and it doesn't. We've already established that people who have COVID can get it again, and that the antibodies only last a few months. And so it's the only way for us to reach herd immunity is through mass vaccination. That's
Mm-hmm.
the only way that we get back to normal.
Right. And let's not forget, once we are vaccinated, we're still going to keep wearing our masks until we're told otherwise. That's still
Mm-hmm.
important.
That person also said, meanwhile, a society so serious to end a pandemic, yet all the corporate stores are open for business. Wake up and smell the coffee. I don't need to wake up and smell the coffee. I don't think those stores should be open. I think that we should. I'm all for a lockdown until we get this under control. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, but I am. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
die, and I don't want anybody
Mm-hmm.
that I know to die, and I definitely don't want 80 million people to die. So,
It's what's going on in India right now is absolutely heartbreaking. It is so terrifying. They are basically out of oxygen in their
yeah,
hospitals. So people are just dying because they can't breathe. This is like, it's like horror movie kind of proportions. It's so terrible.
I know.
And still there will be people, different people saying, well, I don't support a lockdown because it'd be too hard. I mean, look at Brazil, also very similar situation. And the president or whoever runs the country over there just not hasn't been willing even to acknowledge
Yeah.
the
My
devastation.
my brother has friends, that he used to work a lot in India, um, and so he has a few friends over there, and he's been sharing their text messages with me, and it is so sad and so scary. Like, he said that his whole entire Facebook feed is just all of his neighbors asking for where they can find a bed,
Oh,
a hospital bed, if they know of any doctors, where they can find oxygen, and that's all it is.
heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's just it's terrifying and it's sad and it's really, really like it that is the biggest thing. That's the biggest hurdle I have with the people in my family who are vaccine hesitant is how they can be thinking about only themselves during this situation. This is
Hmm.
I can't think of anything that's more self-involved, arrogant,
Hmm.
just
We
how you
want
can be thinking of yourself. I just
we want to find out what motivates people, the people who are vaccine hesitant or who are in the camp of your relatives. What is motivating them, and what would it take? This is like, sounds like a sales tactic. I'm sure it is. What would it take to move them to a yes? Like, what would actually be
yeah.
required? And ask them that. What would be required in order for you to change your mind on this topic, and ask it genuinely, because you
Yeah.
really are interested in what their answer is going to be.
Yeah. I get the feeling that the answers I'm getting are just crafted to be what I want to hear. Um,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
if I'm being honest with you, I am very near my complete inability to continue with it.
Yeah.
It's they've made up their mind. They've decided that these unfounded claims on the internet that have no evidence backing them up whatsoever are more important than family, and
Mhm.
that's their choice.
Mhm.
And at some point, like I said earlier, you have to on with your family. You have to focus on what you can control. And
Mhm.
I have two amazing kids. I have an awesome husband, and I have my uncle in town too. My uncle moved to town a year ago, so I'm probably gonna go visit him soon.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's tough. It's really tough, and I think that one of the things that people have asked me is, would you stay? Are you going to stay away from people who are not vaccinated? I'm going to do my darndest, yes, um, going forward because I don't want to get it. Like, why would we go through this year of hell? Where we're all separated from each other, we're losing our jobs, we're closing our businesses. Why would we go through this year of hell only to after everything opens back up and most of us are vaccinated to start exposing ourselves to it then? Like, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
I will, if I
Mhm.
know that somebody's not vaccinated, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with them. Not in
Mhm.
closed spaces, maybe in a park or something like that.
So I wonder then, when some of us do get to that point when we absolutely feel like we have to make that hard, firm boundary for our own mental health and the safety also of our children and whoever else is in our circle. Um, how do we word that? Are we saying, I will always love you and I will be here for you the minute that you start having questions, or if you have questions, know that you can reach out to me and I'll
Mhm.
respond. But until that time, I'm afraid we won't be having any more contact.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. And it sucks. But you know what? I think that it's I don't know. We're gonna have I think in the future we're going to have a lot of businesses that are figuring out how detrimental it's going to be to them to have an outbreak happen in their establishment. And so more and more people are going to start to realize that it's better to say only vaccinated people can come in here. We're going to have, like gyms, community centers, the pool that I go swim at.
What about
Um,
passports, the vaccine passports?
yeah, I think that eventually that's going to be something that is required to get on a plane. It's going to be required to go to a concert, to go to a movie, to basically do anything where you're in close contact with other people. Because again, the alternative is that these businesses are opening themselves up to an outbreak in their establishment, and if that happens, they get shut down for maybe a week or 2 weeks or something like that. They might lose an employee or two. It's going to be an incredibly expensive thing for them to deal with. So you better believe that eventually businesses are going to think about the bottom line of that. They're going to say, what's better for us, to turn unvaccinated people away at the door or experience an outbreak, And on top of that, we're going to have the majority of Canadians are going to be vaccinated. And we're going to have to if we're at a point where everybody who wants to be vaccinated is vaccinated and we're still in this pandemic because there's so many people who refuse to get vaccinated, how long do you think that those of us who are vaccinated are going to put up with that? And we outnumber them, right? We're going to be pressuring the government for those types of things eventually, I think.
I'm sure you are equally frustrated, since you only live like an hour away from me, by the continued gatherings in our outdoor parks supporting anti-mask, anti-vax. So then we've had sometimes up to 1,000 people congregating there, and they're not wearing masks, and they're refusing to wear masks. And there might be like one police car or whatever. But even if we had all the police officers that we have in my city there, they would be outnumbered. But
Yeah.
it's very frustrating that there's not a higher penalty and that more people are not being ticketed. And certainly people responsible for these events, I don't think ticketing is enough. I think that at some time, maybe they have to spend some time in jail. But the risk you run there is turning them into a martyr, which of course does happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've also studied prison for the last 20 years of my life, and I know that even jail sentences don't deter people.
Mhm.
So I think we're going to be dealing with these people for a long time, but I think that if you shut down, like if you don't let those people in to certain places, that is the thing that will change minds eventually. Because, for instance, the family member that I'm dealing with right now, um, they are avid world travelers. They're never going to get on a plane again. That's never going to
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm.
Um, they love to go to the community pool. That might be off limits to them.
Mhm.
They like to go to the pub to have dinner. That might be off limits to them. They're going to be without their family. They're not going to be able to go anywhere, do anything. They're not going to be able
Mhm.
to travel. And yay, yay! You've somehow given yourself the illusion of control over your own mortality, but for what? At
Mhm.
what cost? At
Mhm.
what cost?
What what do you recommend then for talking to our children when we've reached the decision that certain family members um, will no longer be attending family functions, and not even that, we won't even be doing Zoom calls with them or anything like that anymore? Like, that's a pretty tough one to
Yeah.
tackle with kids.
Yeah, and my son is quite close with them. He's already very upset. So one of the first thing that I did was I explained this to him exactly
Mhm.
as it is. I didn't
Mhm.
hide anything because that doesn't help anything. Because
Mhm.
if he thinks, like, if you try to explain this to your child and you leave parts out, or you're not fully honest about everything that's going on, and
Mhm.
they find that out, then you're the one they don't trust. It's because they know you're lying. They know
Mhm.
that you're hiding stuff from them. So you're the one that they don't trust. So the first thing that I say is to be completely and 100% honest with him. What I did was I sat down with my son, I told him what was going on, and then I explained to him vaccines, how vaccines work,
Mm.
and I explained to him how the mRNA vaccine is different. I explained to him how the mRNA vaccine is plug and play and how it's been around since the technology has been explored since the 80s, and it's not experimental as all these
Yeah.
misinformation pushers are saying
Mm.
that it's experimental. And then I explained to him, like I showed him one of the things that my family member claimed was that your life insurance wasn't going to honor your life insurance policy if you get the vaccine because they're quote unquote experimental. And she named a specific insurance company, totally forgetting that my best friend in the whole world works for that insurance company. um, and I looked it up right away, and
Mhm.
I literally just put it was Manulife and Manulife COVID. I put it into Google, and the first page that came up was their FAQ page saying, "No, absolutely not. That is not the case. That we want you to get the vaccine, and that we will absolutely still honor your life insurance policy if you
Mhm.
have the vaccine." And then I called my friend who I've known since grade 6, and she told me that they actually have vitality points at Manulife, that they reward their customers for making healthy choices, and if you get the COVID vaccine you get 400 vitality points. So
Wow.
not only are they not going to nullify
Reject you.
your life
Yeah.
insurance. Yeah, not
Mhm.
only are they not going to do that, but they're also actively incentivizing people getting this vaccine.
And did you tell
um
your loved one that?
yeah, and then
And what
I
was the response?
not
Or did they
much.
respond? No.
Not
Yeah.
much. I said, what is the source of this
Yeah.
information?
Ye
I said,
yes.
can we all agree now that this source can be trashed? Because they're lying. We've
Mm.
proved it.
Mhm.
But she never told me the source. So, but
Mm.
I did tell that to my son. I showed that to my son. So my son can, and he's very clever. He's super smart. He knew all of this stuff before I told him. But but I think that that's the really important thing. And then the other thing that kind of has sprung from this is my concern over him and my daughter falling down any one of these rabbit holes. And so we've decided that we're going to start doing a lot more in person, no screens allowed time.
Okay.
And that will
Mhm.
be our way of kind of keeping them grounded in reality, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, we are all vulnerable at some point in our lives. And so the people who've fallen down this rabbit hole did so because they were vulnerable. And another group of people that people often don't think of as being vulnerable, but folks who are on the spectrum. So maybe they're, pretty high functioning, but they still do have Asperger's syndrome. They can be really drawn to conspiracy theories, and they're not in any way less intelligent people. Some of them are quite brilliant, actually. But there is such a lure to the idea of secret knowledge, of knowing something that
Yeah.
nobody else knows. And then you said the A word right off the bat, algorithm. We
Hmm.
check one thing out on YouTube or wherever, and bang, 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 we're being fed video after video after video. This is how people come to believe the earth is flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
we
it's
do need
even
to
on
be.
these alternative sources, because
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of the places that were that I was sent to over the last week are like these alternatives to YouTube, because the creators on those platforms were kicked off of YouTube for their
Mhm,
misinformation.
mhm.
Um so those algorithms apply there too. They apply
Yes.
on any search engine. They're all over the place. And the
Mhm.
people in that documentary, The Social Dilemma, the people who they interview are the people who engineered these algorithms.
Yes.
And they themselves are saying how concerned they are about this, and they
Mm-hmm.
themselves are saying that they fall prey to it, and we all
Oh,
do. I don't know
wow.
if you saw my new sneakers with the periodic table on them. That's me getting sucked into shit that they know that I'm going to respond to. Nerdy shoes, right? Like,
Nerdy shoes. Oh, now I've
yeah,
heard everything.
yeah,
Oh, yes. Yeah, we know that granola moms and yoga enthusiasts, people that are anyone that's in kind of the alternative holistic living, they also seem to really be susceptible to falling down this rabbit hole, and it can be very hard for them to find their way out. Partly also because, like with religion, when you break with that community, you're losing, you're losing, you're losing
yeah.
people. You might be losing your part of your identity. You're losing friendships and things that were so important to you. So when we do come across people who've managed to make their way out, um, let us be merciful. Let us be compassionate to these people, to applaud them for having made their way out.
Yep, that's one thing that my family members said to me yesterday. They said, because I said before I debunk this big piece of information that they sent, I said, before I do this, I just need to make sure that you're still in this for good, in good faith, that you're actually going to listen to what I'm saying, and that, you will take it in and incorporate it into your worldview. Um, and she replied and she said that yes, if if all of this information that you send me debunks it all and stuff, I'll believe it, and then you can rub it in my face. And I replied and I said, I would not do that.
You would
I
never
would
do
not
that.
do that. I'd be
No.
too happy that they finally are seeing reality.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely going to be long lasting damage there that needs to be repaired,
Mhm.
especially with, you know, like my husband and my brother's wife are not blood related to them. So
Right. Right.
they have no reason to, they have less reason than me to forgive.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's going to be difficult, but
I'm really sorry you're going through this hard time, my friend.
thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully it works out for the best though, and if it doesn't, I'm not gonna let it slow me down. I'm not gonna let it get in the way of the things that I want to do, and I might even write a book about it. So,
I like
um,
that.
yeah, with my brother, who, funnily enough, my brother and I, over the last 10 years or so, have kind of drifted apart, and this has brought us back together. So, it's got an
Oh,
upside. Yeah,
okay. I like
yeah.
that. I think we're, yes, cat alert. Random saying, this is Steve. This is Steve the cat, and he just wanted to come in and say hi. I think we're pretty much at the end of our episode today. Would you agree?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, please watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix and read Mick West's book, um, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, or listen to it's on Audible. I'm listening to it on Audible because I have no attention span. so, um, so yeah, check those out. And also sign up for the Conference on Religious Trauma, which is going to be in May,
Mhm.
and make sure that you subscribe to us on iTunes and Google Podcasts and give us a review,
Yes,
please.
please.
It
Thanks,
helps us a
everyone.
great deal. Bye,
Yeah, this
everybody.
was great. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.